welcome to episode 1 of JaffleHacks. My name is Phil and welcome to the show. Every episode we'll be doing a new Jaffle or a toasted sandwich for those who don't use that terminology in different ways. So today's Jaffle is going to be a mac and cheese Jaffle, and we'll get into it in a minute. But we have two different types of Jaffle makers, which you'll see as each week goes along. We have the, I use Breville, but they're not sponsoring the show, but Breville have the big one, which is a single large sandwich. And they also have the standard one, which you're used to, that cuts your sandwich in half when it cooks it. So depending on the type of recipe that we're doing, we'll use either or, but today we're going to be using what they call the big one, the single sandwich, which will be great for our mac and cheese Jaffle. So we're not going to do things by halves. We're not going to buy frozen mac and cheese. We're not going to get the stuff that you buy in a packet and mix up in a saucepan. We're going to make our mac and cheese from scratch today. So what we've got is we've got three types of cheeses. We've got some tasty vintage cheese. We've also got some standard cheddar and also some vintage cheddar with a bit of Parmesan cheese grated on top, which we'll mix into the mix. We've got our butter and our flour and milk to make the roux, and of course we've got our pre-cooked macaroni. We'll show you the bread later on, but what we've also got going in the oven at the moment is some bacon, streaky bacon, with some olive oil and salt on it, which is cooking, and it'll get nice and crunchy, which we're going to dice up and mix into the Jaffle before we put it into the sandwich press. So without further ado, we're going to make some mac and cheese, get it going, and then we'll show you how to do the Jaffle later on. Have a look at this. All right, so we're making our mac and cheese. We've got our pot going on the oven, and what we're going to start off with is mixing in some butter, plenty of butter. We'll have the recipe up on the website, but we just need to melt that down progressively, and we'll get that going, get it into a nice melt, and then we'll start making our roux. To do that, we've got some plain flour. We'll need 2 tablespoons of the plain flour that you'll use for the mac and cheese, and we'll mix that up, and of course you'll need 500 mils of milk. So we don't want to burn the butter, we just simply want to melt it. So we've got it at a low level. We can hear the sizzle going on at the moment, which we don't want too much, so we'll turn that down just a little bit. And as that's going through, it's getting close to being melted in there. We'll add 2 tablespoons. And since that's a dessert spoon, we'll add just a little bit more just to cover ourselves. 2 tablespoons of butter, and we want to start mixing that up right now to get it into a nice paste. You can see that's already starting to thicken up, and that's coming along very nicely indeed. So that will continue to thicken up as we add our ingredients in. We will start adding our milk in now. So 500 mils of milk, which is 2 cups, 2 standard cups. So we'll start mixing that in and stir that around into the butter and flour mix, and we'll just keep stirring that till it thickens. Okay, so we've made the white sauce. As you can see, it's a few minutes later, so we're going to start mixing our cheese in. So we'll start off with the first type. As we said, that was some vintage cheddar with a bit of Parmesan mixed into that. So what we want to do is going to start that to melt it. And you can see that that sauce is thickening up very nicely. There is a lot of cheese in this, around 250 grams of cheese, but it's going to be nice and gooey when it's finished. So we'll throw in the second lot of cheese, and as that starts to melt down and mix in, you'll see that's thickening up even more, which is getting really nice consistency right now. And we'll throw in our last cheese, which is the Colby. The good thing about the Colby is it gets very gooey when it's hot and melted, so that'll add extra consistency into the mix. So we'll mix that through slowly. We'll let that sit for a moment. So we'll let that sit. What we're going to do at this point is add some salt and pepper into the mix, so that adds just a bit of seasoning into there before we put it into the oven. So there's some salt. There's some pepper. I'll stir that through. You can see that's a really good consistency on there right now. So I think we're ready to add our macaroni in, which we've pre-cooked. And I'll grab that in. And you can see we've got the macaroni to throw in there now, which we'll just blend in and stir it right through. That's cooked well, but if you want to cook it even just a little bit underdone when you do the boiling process, it will absorb some of the liquid in from the mac and cheese, so it'll have a really good consistency to it later on. So as you can see, we're stirring that through, breaking up the clumps if you've got any in there, and getting that to a really good point. So basically our macaroni is done. So we're gonna have way too much for our jaffles, but that's the good thing about mac and cheese, it's always tasty by itself, which is where people mainly eat it anyway. So we'll turn that off, we've mixed that through, and before we throw it into the oven, this is optional, but we'll get some breadcrumbs and sprinkle it over the top. These are just standard breadcrumbs, but if you like to use panko breadcrumbs, you can. Gives it a nice crunchy texture when it comes out of the oven, and it will also brown up a bit on the top. So I chuck that into the oven for about half an hour. That'll just cook through, it'll brown up on the top. You can even add some Parmesan cheese onto the top, but we've already got plenty in the mix. And once that's done, we'll come back and make the actual jaffle. Okay, so we're back and we've got the mac and cheese out of the oven. As you can see, it's nicely cooked. Right there, you could even leave it in a bit longer if you like, but we're gonna leave it over on the side just to cool a few minutes whilst we get our bread ready. So what we've got is, we've been to our local baker and we've got them to cut the bread in a long direction so that we get the full coverage of the jaffle line there. The one thing that I did make a mess of is that width is too short for the iron. As you can see, it doesn't cover it up, so we'd get a lot of mac oozing if that was the case. So I've got a little trick I'm going to show you on this, and this is a true Jaffle hack here as we get it onto the page, onto the Jaffle line. So what we're going to do is we're going to spread that out. We'll butter one side. As you do, how much butter you put on it is entirely up to you, but the more the better, because it'll give it a nice consistency there. And we'll do a bit more on this side. Now for extra flavour, what we're going to do once we've buttered it, we are going to get some fresh Parmesan and we're going to grate it directly onto that butter. And when it goes into the jaffle line, it's going to get nice and crusty and give a nice tangy Parmesan crust on the outside. So we'll cut that like that. To cover for our width issues, we're going to slice this one directly in half. So we get that, we're going to flip it over, right, covering up the edges, and then we're going to flip that over like that with a bit of coverage, and that's going to seal in once we've done the rest. So we'll get our other piece, have it ready to go for our top layer. And this is something that happens quite often, and you find a lot of breads as they come from, whether you get it from the supermarket, you get it from your baker, they don't match the exact size of your jaffle iron. And it means you get a very, very, very messy jaffle iron. Chances are it's going to get messy as it is, but we want to limit that as much as possible. So we've done our piece of bread for the top. So what we're going to do now is grab a large serving spoon. But before we continue with the thing, we're going to put some bacon in. We pre-cooked this bacon earlier in the oven with a bit of olive oil and some salt on top. So we just layer that on however you like. You can even crumble it up and put it into the mac and cheese mix if you like. You don't want the bacon to go over the edge of the cut, because otherwise it's going to have issues doing the cut later on. So we want to just get it settled in nicely there. A little bit of bacon left. I think that will do. Enough bacon. You can never have enough bacon. So now it's time for our mac and cheese. So we'll move that over. You can see what we're doing here. And we'll move the mac and cheese back over. Well, it's nice and heavy, and you don't want to grab it by the edges because it's extraordinarily hot. When you can hear that sizzle going in the hot mac and cheese. So we're going to drop that right in there. And plunk it in on the top. You don't want to overload your jaffle, but you don't want to put too little in it either. Now, at this point, you can add your own chives. You can even add jalapenos if you like something a bit hotter. But in this particular case, we're doing it exactly as is. So we'll put our piece of bread in over the top, and we'll get our second piece on there, cover it up a bit, and hope we don't get too much spillage. Now, some people like to heat the Jaffle iron up before they put that in. I don't, because I'm going to get it as toasty as possible. So we'll squeeze that down, clip it in. We've got so much in there it barely clips in, and we'll let that go for around 5 to 8 minutes and continue from there. Alright, so we've been about 5 to 8 minutes now with that going in the Jaffle iron, so we're going to turn it off and we'll have a look at it and see how it's going, and give it a bit of a shake. Oh, and look at that. You can see a lovely mac and cheese Jaffle with some parmesan on top. You can see it's given a bit of a edge on where we've joined up the pieces, but still it's going to be really tasty. So we'll grab some tongs and a knife. Grab that out like that, put it down on the board. And that should, if all goes well, cut perfectly in half. So you can trim off the edges if you like, which I should use a bigger knife for. They're always the tasty bits, eh? So we've got our fries ready to go. I'm going to cut that in half. And then you can see our tasty mac and cheese Jaffle set up, ready to go. So there you go. There's our mac, cheese and bacon Jaffle with some parmesan crust and our olive oil and parmesan fries. Remember, follow us, subscribe to the channel here on JaffleHacks. There's plenty more videos to go, so you can do that down the bottom. Add your comments, tell us what you would like to see on JaffleHacks in the future. Next episode though, we are going to do a dessert Jaffle, so make sure you have a look for that when it is released. But you can also visit the website at www.jafflehacks.com. That's JaffleHacks.com. This is Phil saying thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.